Hello YouTube, this is King Orange here, back again for another video. And here today fellas, I am covering my very first psychological breakdown analysis. I would also like to state that much of what I am producing here today was very much inspired by my good friend Diponic. Me and him used to talk about this concept for a while. However, he was the one that really got it going with spearheading his videos both on his psychological analysis of the Green Goblin and later his second one being a psychological analysis and breakdown of the Scarecrow. I want to be clear with that because I want everyone to know here and now that in spite of the creations that I make, it still does me a great service to know that there are others that think of wonderful ideas and how much they've inspired me. So with that out of the way, we shall begin my very first psychological analysis. This will be that of Eobard Thawne, aka the Reverse Flash from DC Comics, who in live action was played famously by a combination of Tom Cavanagh and Matt Ledger. I also want to be clear that this analysis of Eobard Thawne will primarily be coming from the Flash live action television series produced by CW. However, other supplementary material will be included for this analysis and breakdown in order to provide more context, such as the Flash comic books, the Flashpoint Paradox movie, and the Suicide Squad Hell to Pay movie. I also wish to make clear that this analysis will only be accounting for Eobard Thawne's appearances within Season 1, as this is his main version and incarnation, and later incarnations of him throughout the series have existed mainly as time remnants, that being the Flashpoint time remnant and the post-Season 1 time remnant that was generated by the Negative Speed Force, respectively. My only exception to this rule will be accounting for the backstory that was provided by the Season 2 time remnant of Eobard Thawne, as even though he does exist as a time remnant, he is not driven by separate circumstances nor conceived in a different way that would alter his characteristics, as he mainly just exists as a younger version of the character, and has no memories or thoughts that are related to Season 1 of this show. I would also like to be clear that I am not currently a certified psychologist, and all of my conclusions are based solely on my own independent research of the diagnosis that will be used, so take what I have to say with a grain of salt. It should go without saying not to use this video as a reference or source to actually diagnose someone with a mental condition of any kind. I would appreciate that this misuse does not happen, as this reflects poorly on me and my own channel. Thank you for your understanding. I would also like to make clear that images will be utilized that are not entirely accurate, as these will mainly just be used to try to help serve as a visual representation of the events, and as such should not be taken as the canonical images for each of these scenes. So please understand that, and please, I do not want to hear in the comment sections that I did the wrong images or contradicted what I said earlier. I didn't. With that out of the way, let's begin. Born in the year 2151, Eobard Thawne grew up and ended up becoming a very ingenious and influential scientist within the 22nd century. However, he also grew as a devoted fan of the Flash, to the point where he ended up growing obsessed with the long-deceased superhero, and eventually made it his mission to want to try to become the new Flash of the second century. This obsession eventually drove Eobard to want to replicate the reaction that ended up giving Barry Allen his powers, in order to gain the powers of a speedster himself. After multiple attempts and spending most of his family's money, it ended up succeeding, and Eobard Thawne eventually gained a connection to the Speed Force. This eventually led Eobard Thawne to get ready to make a debut as the new Flash of the 22nd century. However, right when he was about to make his debut, saving a crowd who was in desperate need of help, Barry Allen ended up traveling to the future and ended up managing to save this crowd before Thawne did. Feeling humiliated by how his idol could have turned around and undercut his debut and his ability to present himself as a new hero to the public, Thawne tried to figure out why. Thawne ended up traveling back in time, and upon his visit of the Flash Museum, he came to realize his true destiny, that he was never going to become the Flash. Instead, he was fated to become the Reverse, that he was known as the murderous speedster, the Reverse Flash, and that his fate was directly tied to this, and that everything leading him up until this point was for this purpose and this purpose only, that he was never going to be the hero he wanted to be. And so, his obsessive love with Barry Allen / the Flash became an obsessive hatred, and a desire to rid himself of the man that he thought was his greatest hero. Throughout the years, the Flash and Eobard would end up battling for many, many years, facing many conflicts against each other, all for the purpose of trying to one day be able to kill him. However, Eobard Thawne eventually realized that neither him nor the Flash were truly strong enough to overcome each other. Originally, it felt like a hopeless and everlasting conflict that would last for eternity. However, for reasons unknown, Thawne eventually discovered the Flash's greatest secret, his secret identity and his name. This led Thawne to attempt one final Hail Mary to rid himself of the Flash, by traveling back in time and eliminating Barry Allen when he was just a child, thus killing the Flash before he ever got the chance to become the Flash. However, something Eobard did not account for was that future Barry would follow him. Him and Thawne engaged in one final battle within the Allen home, and both ended up landing solid blows against each other. However, eventually, the Flash ended up succeeding in getting his younger self out of there. This caused Thawne to be enraged, believing that it rid him of his one chance to eliminate his old rival. However, he came up with a backup plan. What if Barry was to suffer a tragedy so horrible, so awful, and so traumatizing that he could never recover and therefore never become the Flash? So he then proceeded to kill his mother instead. However, on his way back of traveling to the future, believing he had won, he ended up losing his connection with the negative Speed Force, which resulted in him being trapped within the 21st century. After realizing that he can no longer time travel himself back to the future, Thawne eventually came to the conclusion that the only chance he would have to get back to his home timeline was to create the very same person that he had hoped to eliminate from his life, that being the Flash. Thawne ended up orchestrating the death of Tess Morgan, and later would kill and come to impersonate Harrison Wells through using a piece of technology that altered his entire DNA structure to look, sound, and have every physical attribute of him. 15 years under the alias of Harrison Wells, Eobard Thawne would end up launching the particle accelerator, which was designed to be a piece of machinery that would expand the possibilities of science to such a degree that it would be equivalent to the discovery of atomic weapons, except even grander. However, unknown to all but Eobard himself, the particle accelerator was always meant to fail, and instead, he specifically designed it to basically cause the birth of metahumans and to cause a lightning strike to occur on Barry Allen, thus giving him his powers and enabling his connection with the Speed Force. 9 months after the particle accelerator explosion, Barry Allen would end up waking up from his coma and would proceed with the remainder of his Star Labs employees, that being Cisco Ramon and Caitlin Snow, would all work together to train Barry Allen on how to properly control his super speed and later train him on how to be a crime fighter superhero, the Flash. Over the course of time of Barry further training and him operating as the Flash against low-level metahumans, Eobard Thawne simultaneously was threatening Joe West, under the threat that if he continued to try to investigate who the Reverse Flash was, Iris West would end up being killed. Eventually, the Reverse Flash directly revealed himself to Barry Allen, and simultaneously taunted him as well as, well, pretty much kicked his ass. While this was unknown at the time of why this was being carried out, it was being done in order to incentivize Barry to get faster at a much quicker rate, in order to help the Reverse Flash on his goal to get back to the future. Later within the same episode, Eobard Thawne would end up creating an elaborate scheme in order to steal a tachyon device. This tachyon device would allow him to temporarily restore his speed for short, limited periods of time, and also allow him to maintain consistent speed over the Flash. To accomplish this, he used holographic technology to create a separate image of the Reverse Flash in order to convince people that they were two separate people. On top of that, Eobard Thawne ended up using a speed mirage during the Ascending Chaos. This speed mirage basically enabled an afterimage, which would give everyone else the illusion that the Reverse Flash, or Eobard himself impersonating Harrison Wells, could be in two places at once, thus redirecting any suspicion away from him that him and the Reverse Flash could be one and the same person, while simultaneously accomplishing his objective in stealing the tachyon device. It is also worth noting that during this encounter, Eobard Thawne killed every other cop that was present other than Detective Joe West and Eddie Thawne, the latter of which was Eobard's long-distant ancestor, and so Eobard went out of his way to try to ensure that Eddie would remain alive and, for the most part, well. This eventually led to Eobard having another brief skirmish with the Flash, with this time refusing to hold back in any sense of the word, and demonstrated perhaps almost an instinctual willingness to kill him if it wasn't for being saved by Firestorm. Later on, in Season 1 Episode 15, Cisco Ramon would end up reopening the investigation to try to figure out the identity of the Reverse Flash. During this time, he grew obsessed with trying to discover what went wrong during the Christmas incident, only to discover the whole incident was in fact orchestrated by Harrison Wells. Upon the revelation that Harrison Wells and the Reverse Flash were one and the same, Eobard Thawne ended up presenting himself fully to Cisco and explaining both the incident and his overall motives in order to use the Flash and get him faster in order to get him to secure his place back in the future. Thawne would also explain the truth that it was never his initial intention to kill Nora Allen, Barry's mother, and instead that he had went back in time in order to kill Barry himself. After explaining all this information to Cisco Ramon, Eobard Thawne then concluded that he could not keep Cisco alive, as he now existed as a loose end for his plans. Upon getting ready to kill him, Eobard Thawne, in perhaps what could almost be seen as an act of remorse, explained that Cisco was the hardest one that he had to keep this secret from, as after everything that had happened in the many years they had worked together, he had grown quite fond of Cisco and in many ways saw him as a son that he never had.
Forgive me, but to me you've been dead for centuries.
However, fortunately for all parties involved, this happened around the same time Barry managed to time travel for the very first time, thus resetting the events and ensuring that Cisco never died and that the identity of Eobard Thawne remained secret. Not long after the time travel incident, Barry Allen eventually started piecing together that there is a possibility that Harrison Wells could be the Reverse Flash, after retaining a piece of information that was only made available to him in the alternate timeline, with the suspicions only being concerned when they tested Cisco Ramon's new vibe abilities, which allowed Cisco to see into alternate timelines. This eventually led to Team Flash trying to set a trap for Eobard that would force him to reveal himself. However, Eobard was aware of this trap happening, coming to reveal that he knew everything that was going on, stating himself that he had his own plans set, and even making clear to Team Flash that their lives were made quote-unquote better because of him. During this conversation, he also ended up admitting that in spite of how difficult his time within the 21st century had been, he ended up coming to actually appreciate the rest of the team and gained a degree of affection for them.
I need you. And I also do not anticipate, as difficult as the past 15 years have been for me, how much I would come to love working with you, with all of you. And yet, that does not change what needs to happen. Then face me now! We will face each other again. I promise you, soon. Very, very soon.
Eobard would later proceed to kidnap his ancestor Eddie Thawne during an attempted proposal to Iris West. Eobard would then proceed to reveal himself to Eddie and reveal his identity that this entire time he has been a long descendant of Eddie. He stated his reasoning for kidnapping him was primarily to serve as an insurance policy to prevent Team Flash from getting in the way, as well as to ensure that no harm would come to Eddie that could jeopardize his own existence. During this time, Eobard would also mock Eddie, stating how he was the only Thawne to be regarded as a failure to the rest of the family, and would even reveal that it was never Eddie's destiny to marry Iris. Instead, that was a fate reserved for Barry. Eventually, he and Barry would end up getting into a second confrontation, as Eobard Thawne was working to reactivate the particle accelerator in order to complete one of the final steps in his plan. However, Barry Allen ended up seeking out help, and ended up getting the assistance of both Oliver Queen, aka the Green Arrow, as well as Firestorm. The three of them combined ended up engaging Eobard Thawne, and after a highly dangerous battle, the three had successfully been able to defeat and incapacitate Thawne. Within the Season 1 finale, Eobard Thawne ended up explaining to his old-time rival, while imprisoned by Team Flash, the true reasons behind all of his motives, explained who he was, what year he was from, and including the reasoning for why he killed Barry's mother, stating that he hated him, and that the reasons why no longer mattered to him. What did was the fact that now he needed to create a wormhole in order to get back to the future. Barry, of course, was apprehensive of this, stating why would he ever help someone who used him and manipulated him. Thawne responded by giving Barry the offer he always wanted since day one, the ability to go back in time and save his mother.
many people because I needed you to get fast. Fast enough to rupture the space-time barrier and create a stable wormhole through which I could return home. Why would I ever do that? Because, Barry Allen, if you give me what I want, I'm gonna give you what you want. You can go back and save your mother. You can prevent your father from going to prison. You can reunite the Allen family.
Barry, of course, ended up responding saying that he didn't believe him. Thawne proceeded to end up smirking at Barry and somewhat taunting him, leading to Barry confessing that he wanted to kill him right then and there.
I used to feel that rage every time I looked upon you, and now, somehow, I know what Joe and Henry feel when they look on you with pride, with love.
Thawne, throughout this point, ended up pretty much admitting that he was willing to discard the rivalry that he had between him and Barry, and that now all that mattered was what both of them personally wanted. During the time frame that Barry was thinking about what decision he wanted to make, the rest of the team focused on trying to get through some of the logistical issues of the plan to make sure that Barry wouldn't die, the city wouldn't accidentally get destroyed, and, for Thawne's personal agenda, a way to actually get him home intact since he could no longer connect to the Speed Force. What was chosen to be done was that they would build a time sphere in order to have Thawne safely navigate the wormhole without succumbing to its pressure. During this set of events, Cisco and Thawne would end up having one last conversation with one another, during which time Cisco claimed that Thawne didn't truly value anything that they were. Thawne countered and stated that he never undermined either Cisco, Ronnie, or Caitlin's contributions, and even admitted that he had wished Cisco had been with him the entire time while he was rebuilding the accelerator, that it would have been, quote, more fun for him. Through a brief exchange of frustration, Cisco ended up confessing that in the alternate timeline, Thawne ended up killing Cisco, by confessing to him his entire motives and then crushing his heart, to which Thawne had this to say.
Cisco, I'm sorry.
Cam, it sucked.
Yeah, not for killing you. I'm sure I had a good reason. I'm sorry for the fact that you're able to retain traces of another timeline. You're able to see through the vibrations of the universe. It means I wasn't sure until just now.
Sure of what?
The night the particle accelerator exploded. You were affected too.
What are you talking about? No. I wasn't.
Don't be afraid, Cisco. A great and honorable destiny awaits you now. I only hope that as you're living your great adventure, that you remember who gave you that life, and that it was given out of love.
After taking much time to think about it and hearing the input from all of his friends and family, Barry eventually decided to give in to Thawne's deal, going back in time to save his mother. Thawne ended up directing Barry on what he needed to do in order to go back in time. During this process, a stable wormhole would be created that would enable Thawne to get back to the future. After successfully making it back in time, Barry was preparing to save his mother. However, during the engagement between future Barry and the Reverse Flash, future Barry ended up warning his younger self not to do it. And instead, Barry ended up choosing to allow history as it played out to remain the same, and instead chose to stay behind and say one last goodbye to his mother as she was dying before traveling back to the present time. During this point in time, Thawne ended up praising the time sphere, stating that even Rip Hunter would be impressed by it, the man who invented the very first time sphere. However, as the portal ended up launching Jay Garrick's helmet, Eobard Thawne concluded that it was time to go, but not before going up to Cisco and stating a thanks to him, in which Cisco responded to never come back. Thawne then proceeded to enter the time sphere, and as he got ready to finally make his way to proceed home, smiling at the fact that his 15 years of torment finally came to an end, the Flash ended up jumping through the portal and subsequently breaking the time sphere and directly punching Thawne. This caused Thawne to be directly enraged and caused him to question why Barry didn't save his mother and get the life he always wanted.
You didn't save her. Why? Why? You could have had the life you wanted. You could have had everything you ever wanted.
I already do.
Not long.
Enraged from the fact that Eobard wasn't going to go home and that his entire plans for the last 15 years had been thwarted, Eobard ended up lashing out against Barry Allen, and both engaged in one final battle with each other. Their fight was the most ferocious one they ever had yet, with Eobard no longer holding back against the young speedster. This led to Thawne's pettiness surfacing, as he stated to Barry directly that he would take away everything Barry loved as a consequence for the fact that Barry caused Thawne's plans to fail.
Just so we're clear, after I kill you, I'm going to kill them, and then I'm going to kill your father. I always win. Flash!
However, shocking to every member of Team Flash and to Thawne himself, Eddie Thawne decided to shoot himself and take his own life, in order to cause a time paradox that would erase Eobard from existence. Eobard stood in confusion, having no idea how to go about this and how to try to save himself, even calling for Cisco to help him. This eventually led to Thawne gradually returning back to his original form from the appearance of Harrison Wells that he had taken up for the last 15 years. After Eddie said a proper goodbye to both Iris West and Joe West, Eddie Thawne ended up passing away, and consequentially resulted in the time paradox solidifying and erasing Thawne from existence, with Thawne saying his final words to Barry and giving Barry a question to ponder on in his years to come.
I've controlled your life for so long, Barry. How will you get along without me?
My diagnosis for Eobard Thawne, aka the Reverse Flash, would be that of obsessive compulsion disorder. The symptoms of this disorder is composed of uncontrollable and recurring thoughts and engages within repetitive behaviors. The reason I gave him this stems from the fact that early in his life he was obsessed with Barry Allen, aka the Flash, and had an obsessive desire to be just like him, only for that obsession to be turned into that of obsessive hatred, with a desire to destroy Barry's life, and eventually, during the latter 15 years of his existence, to control Barry's life in order to suit his own personal agenda. My next diagnosis would be that of a Class A sociopath, whose traits are primarily composed of emotional manipulation, which Thawne demonstrated through bringing up Nora and using it to manipulate Barry in order to get him to open the wormhole for him, a desire of control through threat or the use of violence, something he had demonstrated many times throughout the series, but with his most notable example being that when he blackmailed Joe West to not further investigate him under the threat of hurting or killing Iris, lying for personal gain, which he demonstrated through not only impersonating Harrison Wells and taking up his identity at the expense of Harrison Wells' own life, but also through faking an injury that would cause him to be crippled, which would redirect any suspicion away from him, as well as give him a sympathy card to everyone else that interacted with him. And finally, his impulsive behaviors, which he demonstrated when he lashes out against those that interfere with or otherwise ruin his plans. The most notable example being when he lashed out against Barry at the end of Season 1 for ruining his ability to get back to the future. However, the reason I am diagnosing him with sociopathy instead of being a full psychopath is that Eobard Thawne has demonstrated that he is capable of displaying empathy towards other people, albeit to an extremely limited capacity. such as when he displayed remorse to killing Cisco Ramon prior to the timeline reset, and also displaying to Barry that he at the very least gained an understanding on how Joe and Henry Allen felt when they looked at him with pride and love. I would also diagnose Eobard Thawne with a case of anti-personality disorder as well as narcissistic personality disorder, with the latter being demonstrated with his high intensive ego that he demonstrated to Eddie Thawne, as well as any other associates that spoke with him under his alternate alias of Harrison Wells. My recommended treatments for Eobard Thawne would be a frequent amount of talk therapies for people to try to gain a better understanding on the way he processes things and attempt to break the obsessive compulsion that he feels towards Barry Allen, aka the Flash. I would also recommend antipsychotic medications in order to try to reduce his anger-based outbursts and his impulsive use of violence to get what he wants. And now we have reached the end of the video. Thank you guys very much for watching this. This is something a bit different that I wanted to do for my channel, and I figured, this would be something really fun and interesting to do. This concludes my first psychological analysis. So let me know what you guys think. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to give it a like. If you did not like the video, then feel free to state what I can improve on within the comments below. Also, if anyone has any recommendations for future videos, psychological analysis or otherwise, also feel free to put that in the comment section too. I would really appreciate all of your guys' input. I also kind of want to celebrate the fact that I am now at 1,500 subscribers. I never really would have made it this far if it wasn't for you guys, so I really want to thank all of you for that. And yeah, until next time, I hope you all take care. This is King Orange, signing off.